All right, welcome everyone. Brad Davis here. Another episode here, the Customer Success Show. Brad Davis, your host and founder of Success Panda. And today we have another awesome show. We have Ed Powers joining us. And here's Ed. You want to say hi, Ed, for everyone watching on LinkedIn?
Hello, everybody. Good to be with you today, and thank you, Brad, for having me.
Awesome. Well, happy to have you, Ed. I was telling Ed before the call started, this came in as a request. So this is our first, I guess, non-Friday call that we are in our typical pattern. So this is exciting because hopefully we can do more of these type of calls where people actually request people that they want to have on the show, and we're happy to do that. So Ed, this is pretty much your show. I'm here along for the ride. So I will go ahead and turn the time over to you, and I will also bring up the presentation.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Brad. And just to introduce myself, my name is Ed Powers. I'm a consultant in the customer success space. I've been both a practitioner and a consultant. I was a vice president of customer success for a couple of different companies. And then been doing a lot of consulting with companies large and small, from startups to multi-billion-dollar companies. My specialties are in the area of analytics and applying neuroscience to the customer journey, as well as continuous improvement. So those are the areas that I focus on the most. And delighted to be with you. So our topic today is how to break through from average to excellent in customer success. So Brad, if you want to go to the next slide there. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about in particular. What is excellent? What does excellent look like? And then where do you find breakthroughs? Because if you're going to be doing excellent work, you got to be looking at where do I find the breakthroughs? How do you lead them once you find them? And then finally, where do you start? So we're going to go through each one of those. Let's go to the next one. So what is excellent? Well, depends on what average is, right? This is a benchmark, and there's plenty of these out there. This is one that goes back a couple of years, and this is fairly consistent if you look at SaaS performance. You have a median value, which is about the average of about 109% of annual net dollar retention from existing customers. So that's kind of your average. Now, net recurring or annual net dollar retention, that is growth in the installed base net of churn. But if you look at what does top 10% look like? You know, if we're talking about C-level work, what's A-level work look like? Well, 10% are greater than 130. Now, this has varied year over year. It's been north of 120, and probably with things being a little slow in tech these days, 120 is probably the upper 10%. So that'll move around a little bit, but you got to be in that ballpark. Now, your company is a little different. Everybody's mileage varies. Some companies have a lot of stuff they can upsell, cross-sell, expand. Some don't, and that's okay. I mean, you have to take all these benchmarks with a grain of salt. But one thing that's also true, and especially true in this study, is that in order to get that high NRR, you obviously got to hang on to your customers, and you got to protect the revenue you're getting, right? If you have a high amount of churn, of course, your net is not going to be there, because any growth you get is going to be going out the back door with customers that churn. So it implies that we need to hang on to our customers and have high net revenue retention to begin with. In this same study, the average churn on a revenue basis was about 14%. And the top 10% of performers were less than 5, so about 3 times better than average. So that gives you some sense about what does excellent performance really look like? What does it mean? Again, take it with a grain of salt. Your mileage may vary, but if you're in that ballpark, probably doing pretty good. So let's talk about how do we get there. Let's go to the next slide. So there are 3 strategies that I've learned over the years working with customer success and doing it myself, there's really three strategies when you break it down. We know all of these, right? The first strategy is reactive. Account sends you an email and says, we're going to cancel our agreement. So what do? You get on the phone, you try to talk them out of it, right? That's being reactive. We all want to be more proactive though, right? We want to get away from the dumpster fires. We want to deal with situations while they're small. So we do things like do good customer success planning and customer success realization and onboarding, and we deploy customer health scores, and we try to build those relationships and get customers to value so that when the time comes downstream and it's time to renew, they're more likely to do that and they're more likely to buy more. That's where most of us spend our time. But there's this third area, which is being truly preventative. In the preventative world, it's kind of like using, materials that won't burn. We prevent the likelihood at all that someone is going to cancel. This requires the entire enterprise. This transcends what you do within your function. It takes the entire village to do this. But this is where the real breakthrough performance is. This is the real A-level work. When customer success is a way of doing business, it's not just someone's job, right? Now, in terms of results, what do we see? Well, what I've experienced, those that are doing only reactive work, if someone says, I'm canceling, maybe 10 to 15% of the time you can talk them out of it. They'll kick that can down the road. You got to give them a big discount. You give up your revenue and your profit. But yeah, that's 10 to 15% effective, right? Moving the needle. Not much. Worthwhile, but not much. Proactive, on the other hand, when I have stood up brand new customer success operations myself in companies that didn't have that, I saw an immediate reduction in churn of about 30%. And some of the colleagues that I've talked to who've done the same, it's 30, 40%, something like that. So about twice as good as what you would get just reacting to it. But the home run is on the preventative side. If you can get the entire company working towards customer success, all the functions, sales, marketing, product, engineering, professional services, support, finance and accounting, when everybody's focused on retaining and growing customer relationships and they're working together towards that end, your success rate is 90 to 95%. It is not even close. You crush it. And a lot of teams are doing some of this now. They have good relationships with sales or with product, good working relationships. They have some spot areas that are working well. But how do you get the entire enterprise doing that? How do we get from being just kind of average to really killing it? That's this preventative piece. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Mechanically, how do you do that? What does it mean to you? And what does it mean to you professionally and personally to do that, right? So let me walk you through this process. It's one that I have used multiple times. It really, really works. And let's kind of run through it. So let's go to the next slide. The first thing we need to do in our breakthrough improvement roadmap is to uncover where the breakthroughs are. Kind of sounds obvious. Where does this begin? Well, it starts with a simple question that we do not ask nearly enough. Why do customers churn? And why do other customers stay and buy more? The why question is so important. If you want to find a breakthrough, if you want to find that home run, if you want to find how to really significantly raise your performance, you got to be asking this question. It's absolutely crucial. We spend most of our time talking about the what and the where and the when and the who and the how, right? That's what we focus ourselves on 95% of the time. Very rarely do we ask the why question. So how do we do that? Let's go to the next slide. This is where you do that. You go and you talk to your customers, or you hire people to go do it. I do this for clients. There's other consultants that do that. Sometimes there's an advantage to having someone who can go there and, a third party, they can talk very candidly to you about why they made the decisions they did. And when you have those conversations and you're really good at having those conversations, you get deep, rich context and perspectives about here's what was going on, here's what really mattered to us, here's what didn't matter, this is why we decided what we did. And getting that qualitative information is absolutely critical. You can do that on a small scale and start to see and hear patterns in that. On the right-hand side here, though, you got to get to quantitative after that. The best combination is qualitative plus quantitative, where in this example, this was a client who had in their cancellation flow, if a customer said, I'm going to cancel my agreement online, it would pop up and say, gee, we're sorry to see you go. But in order to handle your request, we need you to fill out this required field, one page, right? This required screen. Tell us why. Give us some feedback. What were the reasons why? In this case, select up to 3. So once we have that data, now we can quantify that. We can tally this. How often is this happening? How often is this reason coming up? Who's saying this? What segments are saying that? We can start to really do some good analysis here quantitatively. So what do we do next? Let's go to the next slide. Now we need to get to the economics. No matter what we do, we have to make the business case. Why should we change one thing? What are the economics? We need to be able to go to the senior bosses and say, this is how much this is costing us in terms of revenue, cost, valuation. That gives them motivation and reasons to prioritize this, to make this something that they want to go and fix. So we've got to get at the economics. Well, how do we do that? Let's go to the next slide. Pareto analysis works great for this. It's excellent for this particular application. That little red box is not quite in the right place. Not sure why that slipped up. But the idea here is that we have on the left-hand side a percentage or account or dollars or something like that on the first y-axis on the left side. On the right side, we have cumulative percentage. So it goes from 0 to 100% from left to right. And across the bottom, you see a number of categories. And these categories are the ones that are most frequently mentioned, right? So we can use Pareto analysis to look at where's our 80 for 20? You've all heard of the Pareto principle, right? Where's 80 for 20? Where do we focus to get the biggest bang for the buck? And what are those critical few things we need to work on? And what are the trivial many that we can ignore? And candidly, there's a lot of stuff that are other reasons that we're not going to touch. There are some that are really big and meaty and we need to go after. And if you look at that, some of those categories didn't come through, but they're things like bad fit, buggy software, too hard to use, didn't get the value we expected. So some of the, wasn't priced right. Some of those things are things that customer success has some impact on, but a lot of them they don't. We don't control fit. That's not part of our job. That's sales and marketing. Are we bringing in customers that meet our ICP? Is there a good fit between their problem and our solution? We kind of just inherit that, right? But some of the other things we do have some influence over. Did I get the value I expected? Well, yeah, customer success plays a role in that. So part of what comes out of this analysis is understanding, it ain't just us. This takes the entire village. And some of these things may have, the biggest lion's share of the problem may have nothing to do with us. And we need to communicate that, right? So doing some analysis using that quantitative data and tying numbers to that, 80% of our $12 million ARR problem can be attributed to these 8. So if we want to solve the churn problem, here's where we go. This is where we need to focus. Incredibly valuable to have this. So let's go to the next slide. What happens next? Well, we need to get commitment from the CEO. We got to go to the CEO, and he, she, or they needs to say, we're going to do something about this. This is a priority. If you're trying to work across the enterprise, if you're trying to drive long-term strategic change and go from C-level work to A-level work, that's going to take a lot of hard work by the entire company to get there. And you can play a role driving the organization that way, but you've got to get an ally. You've got to get the CEO pounding the table saying, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do this. This is not optional. So we got to get their commitment. Well, how do we do that? Let's go to the next slide. This is a great thing to keep in mind, and it comes from John Kotter, who is the father of change management. He's been doing this. He's from Harvard Business School. He's been doing this for 40 years, studying how organizations change. How do they transform themselves and become really good high performers, really manage that change well. And one of the books that he wrote talks about something that's critically important. This is a great quote. People change what they do less because they're given an analysis that shifts their thinking than because they are shown a truth that influences their feelings. What he's saying is that appeal to the heart first and then show the numbers. This works really, really well. When people have an emotional attachment, that provides motivation for doing something. And the data is there to justify the decision that they've already made. So whenever we're trying to get people to engage and commit to something, start with the heart. Get people emotionally attached and engaged in what you're talking about, and then show the numbers. So how do we do that? Well, if we've been interviewing these customers, you can make a highlight reel. You can do a supercut, and you can say, hey, I just want to show you something. This is what our customers have been saying. And you play the tape. And the CEO will hear over and over again, they keep saying this thing. And then you pull out the numbers and say, you know what? These customers were X amount of millions of dollars that we lost. This is not an isolated problem. This is a big problem. And now let me show you the Pareto. This is what they're really talking about. Here's how much money, and here's the areas. The CEO is going to see that and say, you're right. These are big numbers. It affects our valuation, affects our cash flow. We got bonuses tied up in this. We got investors that are asking about this. Okay, how do we get started? Now you got to have a plan. This is the next box. When the CEO says, okay, what do we do about it? What do you need me to do? You need to have a plan. And more than that, you need to have a way to deploy that plan, to execute it, and then review. Because you have to coordinate all of this activity across the whole company. So this is where a practice that I've used for 30 years works brilliantly. It's called Hoshin Kanri. Not too many people know about this, but this is a Japanese technique. Hoshin in Japanese means a bright, shiny needle like you would find on a compass, a magnetic compass. Kanri means control. So what that means is it is directional control, if you will. This is the direction that we're heading, and that needs to be set top down. So this practice was something that was developed way back in 1968. It's used by these companies who you'll recognize, major companies that use this in place of things like OKRs and MBOs and things like this. And the reason why it's so powerful is this. It gives highly focused, top-down, closed-loop integration of planning, execution, and learning. It is a closed loop. And when you get this thing going, it's a juggernaut. I mean, it is absolutely magnificent. We used it at HP at a company with 200,000 people with $40 billion in revenue, and you could turn that ship with this thing. And we did. That's how we got big changes happening across HP. And what you do is the process is you pull those senior executives together, usually an offsite day and a half, and you review your strategic plan and you get some updated information. You get that externally from customers, suppliers, technologies. You look at your current capabilities and you thrash on it. It's a facilitated conversation where you break out what are our critical business issues, what are our objectives, what are our key success factors. And people are writing on the wall and flip charts and debating and arguing. And I like what you're saying there. And, a lot of fur is flying here, right? But what happens is everybody comes out of these sessions with one singular breakthrough business objective that the entire company is now going to go execute. It is not a functional concern. It's not R&D needs to get their act together or sales needs to sell more. It's no, we have a business problem here, and we're going to work together to solve this business problem. And it's a singular breakthrough. One thing we're going to do, not 138 things, one thing we're going to do. And we're going to focus on it. We're going to commit resources and time, and we're going to make a change here, right? When you break that down, that's the planning and deployment process. You break that plan down into smaller and smaller chunks that you distribute in the organization in a very structured way. Then that drives into implementation. People take those pieces that they can do something about, they turn the crank and they execute. And then you have a review process that goes from lowest to highest again. You aggregate that back up again, and you do that at least once a quarter. So all the way through, if you drive this circle and you add really good leadership practice, guess what? All those arrows are pointed in the same way, right? You don't get this zipping around. We're going that direction, they're going that direction, or everybody's got random chaos. It pulls all of those arrows together, and everybody's focused on this one breakthrough. Again, it works magnificently, and this is how you drive enterprise-wide breakthroughs, where you go from here to here, and you do it in a very fast time frame. I'm talking, enterprise-wide change, a year to a year and a half. You are in a very different place after that. This really works. This structure, planning, execution, review, attached to leadership, powerful, powerful stuff. So what do we do next? Well, we have a structure to execute this. Let's look at the next slide. Let me show you an example so you know what this looks like. Here's one that's kind of sanitized a little bit, but you get the idea. One piece of paper. You get all these executives in a room and you produce one piece of paper. But this one piece of paper is incredibly powerful. At the top, you have a situation statement. Why are we making a change? Why are we seeking a breakthrough? ABC Corporation has made an excellent process in our revenue of the last 3 years. However, customer retention and install-based growth remains a challenge. Our future depends on it. Our Vision 2025 articulates it, and we need to make some fundamental changes in how we're doing things. That's our why. On the left-hand side, you see the objective. What's the breakthrough that we're trying to accomplish? We're trying to improve recurring revenue from our install base by addressing churn and introducing new solutions. Underneath it, how do we know when we get there? That's the target and goal. That ties directly to the objective. That says when we're there. To the right of that, you see it's broken down into strategies. This is how we're going to get there. And you'll notice these are business issues. What are we going to do? We're going to improve opportunity fit qualification process. Angela has her name on that. Angela is the owner. She's accountable for that. She's that senior leader that's going to lead that initiative. Implement value selling and realization. Brian owns that. Develop and introduce ABX, a new product. Juan owns that. Mature our SQA, our software quality assurance process. Blake owns that. They have some defect problems. Improve technical deployment and training quality. And that's Christy. So we have owners against each one of those. And to the right of those, we know when they're done. We know what success looks like for them. So we've taken a breakthrough objective. We've broken it down into some executable strategies, and we have some measures. Now we're ready to go. We can then break that down into smaller and smaller pieces, deploy it, execute it, review it on a calendar, and we got the engine cranking here. So that's the high-level structure. Now let's go to the next slide. You'll notice that we have to break this down in a lot of cases and run smaller projects, and we need to know how to do that too. We need to execute continuous improvement. That's linked to our Hoshin plan. What does that look like? Let's go to the next slide. Six Sigma is one way of doing it. It is the world's most popular way of doing process improvement. And it talks about a process that uses a framework called DMAIC. So DMAIC stands for define. What problem are we trying to solve? What's the problem here? We measure, meaning we start with a baseline. Where are we starting from? Why do we ask that? Because we need to be able to measure the difference at the end of the day. Did we make any difference, and how do we know? So baselining is incredibly important before you do anything. Where are we now? Next phase is to analyze, break down, and uncover the root causes of the problem. We're not going to treat symptoms here. We're going after root causes. Why? Because if you address a root cause, the impact is much more dramatic and much more sustainable than treating just a symptom. So we use analytical methods, analysis, data, testing hypotheses to arrive at what that cause is. Once we know that cause, well, the next step is easy. We know exactly what we need to improve. That's the I cycle. We implement the solution and measure the results. What difference did this make? Compare those two. Oh, well, that's exactly how much impact we made. And then finally, the last phase is to control, which is to hold the gains. We don't want to backslide. How do we control this? Expand it, standardize on it, make it the new norm. That's the control stage. And the cycle begins again. To give you an example of what this looks like, that's tied kind of to what we just talked about. Let's go to the next slide here. So here's the problem. 20% of our $12 million in lost ARR is due to bad fit. That's that tallest spike that you saw a couple of slides back on the Pareto chart. So we decided we're going to measure that 90-day logo churn, because what we're seeing is that average is pretty high. We lost 12.5% of our customers within the first 90 days. That's a big bite. We see a lot of exits in the first 90 days. Why is that occurring? Well, we're going to do some analysis. We look at some data. Hey, looky here, 70% of this bad fit has to do with one particular customer segment. That's interesting. That's really meaningful. Then we do 5 why analysis, get a team together. The team brainstorms that, and we methodically go through and ask why 5 times. When you ask why is this occurring? Well, it's because of this. Well, why did that happen? Well, it's because of this other thing. Well, why did that happen? Well, because of this other thing. So we go through in a structured way, and we ask those questions, and you ask 4 or 5 times, you're down to the root cause. You start to circle in on a particular cause of that. And in this case, the team found that there was this lack of segment focus. We're treating everybody the same. We're not looking at the differences in segments and even how we're designing products or doing go-to-market. We have this lack of an onboarding post-mortem. We're not feeding that information back upstream. So our salespeople are doing a better job of fit, and our professional services people. And we lack some technical qualification to make sure this is a good technical fit too. Aha. So now we know the root causes. The solutions are very obvious. We define those segment requirements. We add some new features, which was on the Ocean slide a couple of slides before. We do some onboarding reviews. We feed that information back. We learn from what's going on. We add a tech qualification checklist. We implement all that. What happens? Guess what? We went from 12.5% churn in the first 90 days to 5, better than half. We dropped it just by going after these fixes. That's good to know. Where do we go next? We update our playbooks. We add some segment-specific training that's been lacking. We add this fit rating to the customer health dashboard, because guess what? That fit is very predictive of that behavior. So we maximize everything we can get out of this project, and we turn the crank again. We do this enough times, that performance gets better and better and better. That's how we go from C work to A work. Now, there's one missing piece here that we need to do next. As critical as everything else we talked about, we need to manage change. Anytime we're rolling out an enterprise-wide change, transformation, yes, you're going to affect processes, you're going to affect policies, you're going to affect technology, you might affect some information, but the people aspect is by far the most important. You can make all those changes and nobody goes along with this. So we need to manage change very deliberately, very intentionally with people to bring them along on this change. That's what change management is. Here's the problem. Let's go to the next slide. This is how we react to change in varying degrees, right? We feel we have emotional reactions to that when we go from an old way of doing things to a new way of doing things. Some of us are like, hey, this is awesome. This is exactly what I want. Put me in. Other people are like, oh my gosh, this is just one other thing. Why are you putting this on me right now? I got enough to do. Pushback, right? We all react to change. This is a human process, and we will all have to go through this journey together. When we do this, when we manage change, we increase our likelihood of achieving our goals by a factor of 6. Who says that? Let's go to the next slide. This comes from a company called ProSci. They've been doing change management training and assistance for 25 years. They've studied how to manage change and how to make it really work well. I'm a big fan. I'm a ProSci change management practitioner. They define at the top there that acronym ADKAR. What ADKAR is successful individual change. And they say there's 5 phases. We must, as individuals, become aware of what the change is, what the change is all about, why we're making the change, why we're doing that now. There's information. We have to become aware of what that looks like. The D phase, or the desire phase, is we then have to process that emotionally. We all have to go through our reaction to that and process that and come to a decision. Are we going to support this and go along with this or not? And some people don't go along with it. When most people do, you're in good shape, but you have to allow for that and facilitate that emotional change. K stands for knowledge. You have to train people. What is the change? What am I expected to do now? How do I do that, right? We have to train them. The A is ability. We need to be able to put that knowledge into practice in day-to-day life. So all the other things have to be working. The technology, the processes, the policies, all those other things we're working on in parallel have to be in place. Because if we train them and they're not able to put it into play, why do we train them, right? What's really going on? So we have to enable that new behavior. And the last letter there, R, stands for reinforcement. Whenever we change our habits, we have to reinforce them over and over and over again until they become automatic. And that takes time, that takes effort, that takes repetition. If we go through that whole cycle, guess what? We went from where we were to where we really want to be. And we've made that change. All those people came along with us. And we have to manage that. What's critical? Executive sponsorship. That senior executive needs to be actively engaged in the process. They need to be building coalitions with their peers and with the management team. And they need to be communicating frequently about this is happening, this is where we are, this is what we expect of you, and so forth. So public communication, that's that third bullet, is a key element to this. Coordinated, multi-channel, our stand-ups, we're going to talk about it, our all hands, we put it on our website, we have emails going out, we put it in the company newsletter, it's all over the place. You can't get away from it. We're communicating through all those channels on a schedule, right? Here's where we are, here's what we learned, here's where we're going, here's what's working, here's what we're working on next, right? So everybody knows what's going on. Private coaching happens in the background by the executive sponsor with their people. You'll never see that happening in public, but they're sitting down with people and say, Charlie, I need you to come along on this. Tell me your concerns. What do we need to do to get this done? Right? So it's that horse trading. It's that getting that commitment that happens behind the scenes. Also, coaching is incredibly important for first level managers because workers have to come along with this. Users have to come along as well. They're doing coaching both at the team level and individually. And throughout the process, resistance is being managed. We understand the symptoms of that. We hear where people are coming from. We listen to them. We get their concerns. We incorporate those. We advocate for those. We work together on getting people what they feel they need and what they do need in order to come along with something and to participate in the process. That is an active process. And there are some people that just by going through and expressing people's feelings and processing that and talking it out loud, okay, boss, I'm ready to go now. Let's go, right? That's all you need. And then other ones need a little bit more nudging, a little bit more help. So managing resistance happens throughout this whole process. It is equal to importance of everything else we're doing. So let's wrap up here. What does this roadmap look like? It's on the left-hand side. Again, I've been using this for years. It works great. You uncover the breakthroughs. You got to go to customers to find them. And you will find them, I guarantee. You quantify what are the economics, dollars and cents, because you've got to build that business case. You got to show that what that all adds up to. You got to get commitment from the CEO. The CEO is going to come back and say, what do we do? You have to have a plan. You have to have a way of executing the plan. You have to have a way of doing it consistently. Then once you got at the project level, you got to run good projects and you got to manage change. So there's a lot to do here. But if you can do that, you go from being, a functional manager in customer success to being a chief customer officer. Because if you can help the CEO drive change in the way that we're talking about, you're extremely valuable, extremely valuable. You earn your place at the C-level. They see that value right away if you can facilitate this. And in my opinion, this is something that customer success leaders can absolutely do. You can absolutely do this. Everything in here can be done. These are proven practices. You just got to learn them and you got to apply them. Where do we start? Again, start by asking why. Why are customers behaving the way they are? Collect and analyze churn and retention reasons. You've got to quantify that. You've got to get that evidence. Estimate what the dollars are. It doesn't have to be exact. Orders of magnitude work here. People will get where you're going with this. Prepare those customer stories. Sit down with your CEO. Show them those stories. They will have an emotional reaction to that. Build on that, right? They should be pounding the table and saying, we got to do something. We got to do something now. Show them the numbers. Show the roadmap. Boss, I got you covered. We have a plan here. Here's what I need, right? Give me time, give me resource, give me this, give me training. I need some consultants. I need some tech, whatever that is. Make your ask and get their commitment. I can't do this without you. I can't lead this myself. You have a role here. You are the executive sponsor. You need to drive this across the enterprise. I will make this easy for you. I will run this in the background. I will hand you just what you need at the time that you need it and make this simple and easy for you. They're going to sign up for this, right? If it's a real priority, you could go through this whole process and the CEO says, yeah, I'm with you 100%. Love to do something, can't do it now. Okay, no worries. You let me know when you're ready and we'll tackle this, right? That's certainly an answer. And that's my presentation. Last slide here is what's available to you in terms of resources. I actually teach a course on this on Udemy. It's self-paced. Advanced Customer Success is the program where you learn a lot of this stuff. If you want to drill in and learn more about change management, John Kotter's book, Heart of Change, excellent book, terrific book, gets you really fired up about this. You see the path, and he's got tons of examples about companies that transform themselves. ProSize got wonderful materials if you want to learn more about their method. They're not the only game in town. They happen to be my favorite, but there are some good change management companies out there. You want to learn about Hoshin? Been around a long time. This is a great resource for you. Six Sigma's been around a long time. Proven methodology, a lot of what if stuff. I teach a course on analytics that helps you to execute this. You do need to understand how to use numbers and data and uncover what causes are. That's handled in that class. And if you need help in a project, there's my email address. So with that, Brad, do we have any questions?
Yeah, no, first off, thanks, Ed, for sharing that. That was really great. I do have a number of questions that I just wanted to ask you. So, there's a couple here. Let's go to like the old versus the new way of kind of introducing change. I think anybody who's been in their career for any amount of time will go ahead and take this off stage. Anybody who's been in their career or worked at any number of amount of companies know that change is just generally scary, and that when you start talking about the neuroscience and like your specialties, if you're a leader and you like have an idea or you have a vision of how to make change, how do you overcome fear of maybe people that report to you, right? Or because like you said, the emotional kind of needs to come first before then the cognitive. So what have you found to be helpful, or maybe if you want to share some stories, I don't know, it's up to you. You can take that whichever way you want.
Yeah, and again, I would go back to what Kotter says. Show them a truth, show them something that they see it, they understand it, and they have an emotional connection to it. Always start with the heart, and then come back with the evidence, right? Start in that sequence. And there's a great example. I spoke at a quality conference some years ago, and I heard this wonderful story. There was this manufacturing company that made a component that was part of the safety system for automobiles. And what they did was that they wanted to show workers how important it was that they brought this new product to market, how important their work was in affecting people's lives. So what they did is in the middle of the production floor where everybody comes in the morning, they put this car wreck, and it was this mangled mess of metal, and it was just horrific what this was. And they had this little sign, and the sign said, the family that was in this car walked away unscathed because of what you do. I mean, talk about an emotional connection to what, that gives you purpose, that gives you meaning, that connects with you right away. Oh my gosh, that's an amazing story, right? So if you can tell that story, if you can point to real life examples, play that highlight reel. When customers say this is going on, they will tell that story better than you can. Always show, don't tell. Show them what this means. Show people what's really going on here and get that emotional connection. Then follow up with the math. This is why this is so important. This is why we're doing this now. This is why this is a priority. Can I get your support on this? Absolutely. What do you need me to do? Right? So that's how you get that level of commitment throughout the rank and file. But you got to start somewhere. Start with the senior execs, because they got to be behind you 100%.
Yeah, that's my next follow-up question to that is, a lot of, when you were at the very beginning of the presentation, you were showing that a lot of these companies that use the Hoshin Kanri, is that how you say it?
Connery? Mm-hmm.
Connery, yeah. Mm-hmm. I noticed that a lot of those are like really big companies, right? Some would even be called dinosaur companies, right? They've been longer around than dinosaurs. But how do you overcome that objection where it's just like, hey, this is a top-down approach where, we have to get everyone on the same page, and you work through that? Because is change management the same as like innovation? Because one of the things that I hear is that, there's like conferences and people, and it's kind of well known. It's like most of the innovation are coming from small companies, right? So if I was a leader of a small company, I'm like, hey, we're trying to innovate, and it might be a little bit of word salad, but you're like, okay, you're trying to do change management. How do you kind of like sell this concept? Is it just for big companies? Does it work for small companies? Like, do you find friction or pushback when it comes to how people use words and how they define things?
Sure. Yeah, I've used Hoshin in startups. It does not have to be in a multi-billion-dollar company. The power of it comes from focus, right? It comes from focus and unification, everybody coming together around a common goal. It's about that social process. It's about getting that alignment in people's hearts and minds and efforts in agreement and consensus, right? So it works in small companies as well as it works in big companies. The only difference is how many levels you got to break it down, right?
Right.
In startups that I have done, we had the Hoshin plan and we went right to implementation and review, just from point A to point B, and it all worked great, one step. So you do not have to have it. But what the power of it is, the larger you get, even with companies that have 40 or more employees, there's another thing that starts happening. People become more and more siloed, right? We have this sales team, we have this marketing team, we have the dev team, and guess what? It's all of this. Things get thrown over the wall. It's not my job, it's your department. All that stuff starts happening right around 40 employees. And leading companies, those that are doing the A work, understand that's a normal behavior in a growing organization, right? That comes from us. That's actually human behavior, is tribalism, and what you see is all there is, and reinforcement, conditioning, operant conditioning. All of that drives behaviors and drives siloism. So in large companies, they say, you know what? Put aside all that parochial garbage about your function. Let's talk about the business issues we need to solve, and we need to do that together. So Hoshin is a way to break down those barriers. They never go away because that's human nature. We build these little tribes, but we can mitigate their effects to the extent that we get people working together cross-functionally on business issues, getting that going, building those relationships, going through those experiences together. That helps to mitigate it, right? So the power of Hoshin is things that are not necessarily easy to see. It's that social process and that alignment and that focus that really, really happens.
Yeah. No, that's good. I agree with everything you just said, and I think that that can be one of the challenges. I'm just thinking back on certain large initiatives that companies have tried to take on, and tell me about a time when you've either worked with a client or been at a company, and the C-suite, the leadership of the company is like, "Hey, Ed, we want to go in this direction," only for like some months later do they change their mind, because it seems like every company is trying to execute, right? Which is, you hear a lot of that, where the ability of anybody in, like, having A players and being able to execute and all that. So why is not, I mean, why are people falling down? Like, if
Yeah.
there's, you know why is it not working for a lot of companies?
Well, and I've lived through that. And it sounds like you have too. We were acquired one startup I did, and the new CEO was exactly that. I mean, we'd have these monthly staff meetings, and he would go off and pound the table. We're going to do this thing, and I want you to go do that. And everybody would, I was new because we were acquired. So I would run off and start working on it because that's what the boss said, right? And
Right.
then I would come back thinking, okay, we're going to talk about this. And he'd be pounding the table and talking about some other direction that he was going. And
Mm-hmm.
the second time I was looking around at people who worked in this company and I said, what? And they said, yeah, just ignore that. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you do have that. And part of this is understanding what environment am I dealing with here, right? You can't, if you're constantly going off and chasing squirrels and doing all that, wrong thing. If you're dealing with an organization that has the long view, says, you know what, we're going to invest a year or two, a year and a half because we're here and we need to get there. That's part of our plan. We're not going to get distracted by this. We are going to set a course and we're all going to move towards that. If you're not seeing an organization that behaves that way, candidly, you're wasting your time. That's
Right.
not a mature senior staff, right?
Right.
The organization has to be at a level of maturity where the CEO can chart a course and stick to it.
Right. Which I think we see this sometimes play out in business media, where you'll have a leader and then they'll have their, the other C-suite executives or other leaders within the company. And it's not uncommon for a CEO to leave and then having people leave with them, right? Because if you don't have that shared vision, and you perhaps even might have people who might undermine your new vision, then, like you said, that's not gonna work. It
Yeah,
sounds like,
yeah.
because yeah.
And I've done Hoshin at different companies that have nothing to do with churn, have nothing to do with, it's about growth. We need to go, we're doing acquisitions. We want to open up this new market segment. We have a go to market, whatever that is, right? So
Yeah.
it is a mechanism that allows you to drive strategic change,
Right.
regardless of what it is. So, but you need to have that level of discipline. You need to have that level of focus and that level of maturity on the senior staff for sure.
Gotcha. Another question about the Six Sigma, where it uses the DMAIC,
Mhm.
the DMAIC.
Mhm.
When I was looking at that and listening to you explain it, it seems like the challenge, or perhaps the biggest area that you want to make sure that you kind of get right, is the analysis part. And I know that you said that that's something that, the analytics that you specialize in, because getting down to the root cause, right,
Mhm.
of trying to do an analysis and then come to a conclusion about analysis, I feel like that is kind of challenging, because I'm not a statistician, but I know there's like multivariate analysis. There's multiple reasons, and then trying to figure out like what exactly is. But what I'm kind of wondering is, have you ever worked with a company where the senior leadership would say, "Hey, we think we analyzed the root cause," and you've been skeptical, and you maybe try to guide them off of that, because maybe you're looking at the data in a way that's not saying, "Hey, it's because we have, you know, say, poor, ICP match on sales," right? It might be, implementation or things like that. Because I feel like I don't remember who said the quote, but there's nothing more um, there's nothing more unneeded than doing work that doesn't need to be done, or something like that.
Mhm.
So I feel like there's a lot of work that goes on in companies that they're like, "Oh, well, we did that thing, but it didn't need to be done." So how do we understand like the analysis? Is that seems like a hard thing to really get.
Yeah, so there's a lot to talk about there. We as humans, again, going back to understanding our own psychology and our own nature, we humans um, will see a problem and immediately think of a solution,
Yeah.
right? So we see something going on, we trust our gut, we trust our instinct, boom, there's the answer. And that's how most people do things on a day-to-day basis, and that works just fine. The problem is business is very complicated. And
Right.
what presents itself to you is often just the symptom and not the cause. So the question is, let's not leap at this thing with all the best intentions, with all the intuition. Let's make sure if we're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort, consume a lot of resources, let's make sure that we're actually dealing in facts and not
Hmm.
dealing in beliefs. And again,
Right.
that goes back to maturity. If you work in an organization where they say, I love what you're saying, where's your evidence? In God we trust, everybody else bring data. And
Hmm.
if you're in that environment, then you're dealing in facts. And if you address a root cause, you're going to have a much greater impact. Will it take a little bit more time? Yeah, it takes some time. It takes some effort. It takes some data
Yeah.
analysis. It takes a little bit of expertise to get there. But if you can peel that onion and get down to the cause and show the evidence and say, hey, you know what? This is caused by something completely counterintuitive. Had we left at this, we wouldn't have solved the problem. This is what the real problem is.
Right.
And when it becomes there and you see the evidence, you're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I get that. Let's go kill that problem. And you will see much better results. But people have to understand the difference between a symptom and a cause and have some discipline in doing it. And in these big, complex business problems, you can't just trust your gut because your gut can be wrong.
Yeah. No, I like that. So we'll end on a vanity question that I have, just because it not so much, but we've kind of talked a little bit about it, and you've mentioned some of the lines that come from the book, and I think we've talked about this, over the time we've been on LinkedIn. But the book Thinking Fast and Slow,
Mm-hmm.
um, by Daniel Kahneman.
Mm-hmm.
So I've read that twice, and every time I read it, I always just come away with, well, one, he won um, a Nobel Prize from it, or he won is that right? The Nobel Prize, is that it?
Mm-hmm. He did.
Yeah, yeah, he won a Nobel Prize from writing that, and I'm like, man, this guy is so smart. But going back to the what you see is all there is. System one, system two. For those
Mm-hmm.
who haven't read the book, system one is more your intuitions, what Ed was just talking about with your feelings, and then system two is your analytical brain or your decision. And how often? So the question, I want to get to the question. I'm interested in your response because part of your last response to the question was like, hey, you can come with facts and we don't have to kind of lean on system one, right? We can kind of lean on system two. But I just thought of I thought of 6 to 7 like startups or people that I know who run startups who they don't have the facts, Ed. They're not capturing like customer data. So like how do we prevent system one for just taking over all of the leaders when it becomes convenient? Like how do you help senior leaders try to engage system two?
Well, again, the default, and that's in Kahneman's book too, 60 to 80% of the time, we use our intuition. And most of the time that works just fine. For our basic day-to-day simple decisions that we make, that's fine.
Right.
It's only when we're faced with that level of complexity. And I think that um, it is a behavior that needs to change. It's a way of um, possibly asking questions. That's a really interesting theory. What's telling you that? How do you know? Right? You can ask those kinds of questions. And when people are really pressed on that, you say, you know what? I guess I really don't know. Right?
Right.
And when you start to gather counterfactual as other evidence, you say, well, help me understand this because this is what I'm seeing. Let me show you. Oh, that's
Hmm.
interesting. Where did you get that? Well, because of this and this. Well, now I'm a little bit maybe less confident in my intuition. Maybe there's something here that I don't know about, right? So part of that's why, talking to customers is so important and getting their feedback. And it's something we do not do nearly enough. We
Right.
think we understand the customer's reality, and we really don't. So if we
Right.
go and we gather that information, there's nuggets in there, and almost always there's breakthroughs. Almost always there's something, and we can show that they're like, huh, well, I never knew that. My intuition didn't tell me that. Yeah, well, here's some evidence. So
Right.
if we can help lead that change just by asking some really good questions, not saying you're wrong, but how do you know? How do you know it's not this? Because I'm seeing that.
Right. Yeah, no, I feel like there needs to be a nice balance. And you said some of the really, hey, this is what I'm seeing, some very diplomatic ways of trying to present evidence, right, in a way where you're trying to make a case. And I think so many times before, people just fundamentally they might be afraid of change because they think like, hey, I don't have the same skill set, or this might be something new I don't know. Does that mean my job's along the line? I was just speaking with a CS leader earlier today, and they were saying how like a lot of times you think that the communication between leaders is like seamless, but even within leadership and what people are willing to do, we have he had someone who came to his company who had run the same playbook that was at a completely different company, and the whole like people lost their jobs, right, where it's just like they think that one playbook's going to just transfer to another one, and it went really poorly.
Yeah,
And so I think one of the big things, it just takes a level of humility, right?
exactly.
Yeah. So if you have humility, you're able to take feedback, and then if you're in a safe environment, I think there's like I need to find the book, but I think it was in the 1960s. Like one of the best business selling books was titled like leadership, how to lead through fear and intimidation. Like so, I think people need to put down that book and like not take that advice anymore. But no, this was a great presentation, and thanks for answering my like just off the cuff questions, because I had a couple more, but I know we're right at time. So Ed, you want to just tell people again where they can find more out about you and work with you before we sign off?
Yeah, by all means, connect to me on LinkedIn. We converse with each other routinely, Brad, and LinkedIn. So you can connect to me there. You can go to https://se for service excellence partners.com. That's my website, or you can send me an email, ed@se-partners.com. Delighted to talk to you about that. Classes on Udemy, classes with success coaching. If you looked at them, I do teach a course there as well. So yeah, I'd love to talk to you. If you got some challenges, I can help you do everything I just talked about. If you have an eye towards doing this and you want to go do that, I can help you do that. I can walk you through that and assist you in that endeavor. So because I know it works, I've done it myself.
There you go. Success leaves tracks. We'll leave it at that. Awesome. Thanks, Ed, for coming on to the show. Super excited that we were able to do this. And thanks, everybody, for watching, hanging in. And this will also be posted on our YouTube channel later. If you didn't get a chance to watch it now, you can watch it later. Thanks again, Ed, and everyone have a great day. Thanks, Ed, for coming on.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone.